Today I'm going to be talking about doing Pell training, especially if you don't have a Pell. What do I mean by Pell? Pell for swordsmen and women and they thems. They usually a Pell usually refers to a stand, something that is fixed for the purposes of target practice. Sometimes a Pell can also not be fixed, but just be an object, usually a shape of a teardrop, so to speak, hanging from a cord from the ceiling. And then that can be used for thrusting or for some kind of wind or bind practice. But what if you don't have something that is overtly sturdy or immediately comes to your mind as, this is something that I want to hit a sword against? Well, what about these? For me, where I live, I have unfinished drywall right here. So this is something that I can use for Pell practice. We'll go through some other examples as well. You could use this as Pell practice. Probably not recommended though, unless you're very, very gentle. Look at this, corner of a doorway. Solid, built well, and could probably take a beating. If you're going to use metal, definitely recommend either painter's tape or foam or a good combination of the two. Like I said, those were some examples. Now, what do you do when you find your Pell? The purpose is to practice striking. Usually the strikes that you don't want to do in practice because you learn too many other cool things and you want to practice said cool things. This is going to be primarily used for edge alignment. Knowing how you're striking, knowing not just the angle at which you're cutting, but how your hand, your palm line up right behind the sword edge. Here I have a boffer. I am going to demonstrate with said boffer. You will note that it's really hard with this camera and with the lighting to see any edge. That's because boffers do not have an edge per se. They have this flat part that sort of resembles an edge. And this is not a dig against boffers. Boffers are incredibly useful for indoor practicing and newbie practicing. The key thing to note with boffers is knowing where the back of the blade is, especially for sabers. The back is how that lines up with the grip, because that affects your hand, whatever your dominant hand is, or whatever your practice hand is, and how your hand grasps that. Say we're using this as our Pell. I do a little mini cut here, not a complete cut, but a mini cut, because I am seeing where, based off of how I'm standing in relation to the wall, how that affects my cut. As in, where does my blade land? At what angle does my blade land? Looking at the back here using this camera angle, my vision tells me that I have about the first third of the blade landing right here on this edge. fairly strong, which is what I want. This is the back edge. This back edge is facing at a 45-degree angle here towards the camera, as you can see based off of where my hand is. My hand, which you can't see on camera, so here, let me adjust it a little bit for you. My elbow is slightly, but not all the way extended. My hand, my palm, they're facing at that 45-degree angle. Again, where the blade is coming into the edge of the wood here, and where the back of the blade is facing out towards the camera. This is also not just a good way to test strikes, cutting back and forth, or just little baby strikes. And two, this can also depend on what surface you're striking on. Do you want to have a lot of buildup, or do you just want to practice? And do you want to practice as softly as you can because you don't want to hurt or damage the surface? Not all pells are created equal, yes, but it's still good practice. Even just doing these cuts, as you can see here on camera, tells me a lot. And by doing this even flow of cuts back and forth, for me, I'm thinking of the Polish Saber guards 3 and 4. This is telling me where I'm cutting on the Pell and how accurate I am each time. Based off of what I've been seeing, I usually aim up here. Now, if you don't really care about the surface, what you can do is you can put some tape, preferably painter's tape, on it, and then do some more cutting. Here, I put painter's tape on, so bringing my sword up to my normal guard position, I go ahead and start my flow of cutting. Missed one, got one, there we go. I got a good flow going. So what happens? Okay, I switched and I'm going back to here. Now I'm doing some draw cutting. And one final thing I want to note about Pell work, do a pause every so often and check where your guard is coming down. And think back to when you fight, because this is an excellent time to bring what you learn from when you fight other people and you're practicing your strikes here at home. Is your hand and is your guard about where you need to effectively block, and in this case also be able to set up a following attack? Would this adequately defend your head? Would it adequately defend your head against a regular sized person about your size? Or would it adequately defend against a person who's taller than you? Pause. Keep your arms slightly extended in that guard that you have your sword in my case a saber. Check your hand position, check it, and continue. And that is how you set up for a Pell indoors, as well as help motivate yourself to continue practicing, especially if you live in an area with a lot of cold, wet months.